This is not a video about being a better friend. This is not a warm, fuzzy conversation about trust and bonding. No, this is a surgical dissection of the most dangerous illusion in your life, the illusion that the people around you are truly on your side. Let that land, because if there is one thing Niccolò Machiavelli understood with terrifying precision, it is this. The people closest to you are not always your greatest allies. Sometimes they are your most elegant threats, not because they are evil, not because they wake up every morning plotting your downfall, but because human nature, when left unchecked, operates on self-interest. And self-interest, when disguised as friendship, becomes the sharpest blade you will never see coming. You have felt it. You know you have. That strange sensation after a conversation with someone you call a friend, a heaviness you could not name, a quiet unease sitting in your chest. That moment when their compliment felt hollow, when their advice seemed to steer you just slightly off course, when their celebration of your success lasted about 3 seconds before they redirected the conversation back to themselves. You noticed it, but you said nothing. You filed it away. You told yourself you were being paranoid, that good people do not think like that, and that, right there, is the trap. That refusal to see what is right in front of you. That is the weakness Machiavelli warned about 5 centuries ago. The world has changed since Florence. The politics have shifted. The empires have crumbled. But human nature, it remains as predictable as the tide. The masks have simply gotten more sophisticated. The smiles have gotten warmer. The betrayals have gotten quieter. And the people who refuse to study the architecture of human behavior, they are the ones who keep getting blindsided by the people they trusted most. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you audited your friendships? Not emotionally, strategically. When was the last time you sat down and asked yourself, who in my life is adding weight to my armor, and who is quietly poking holes in it? When was the last time you separated the people who genuinely want you to rise from the people who only tolerate your success because it has not yet surpassed their own? If you hesitated, that is your answer. Most people go through life collecting friendships like trophies. The more friends you have, the more successful you appear, the more connected you feel. But this is a numbers game designed for the naive. Machiavelli did not count allies. He weighed them. He did not ask how many stood beside him. He asked how many would still be standing if the tide turned. And that distinction, that razor-thin line between quantity and quality, is the difference between the person who gets stabbed in the back and the person who saw the blade coming from a mile away. This video will not make you paranoid. It will make you precise. It will not make you cold. It will make you calculated. There is a difference between shutting people out and choosing who gets in. There is a vast, cavernous distance between loneliness and solitude. One is a prison, the other is a fortress. And by the time we are done here, you will know exactly how to build yours. 5 quotes, 5 truths, 5 keys that Machiavelli left behind, hidden in his writings, buried beneath layers of political strategy and courtly maneuvering, but they were never just about politics. They were about people, about the invisible games that unfold every day in your living room, at your workplace, in your group chats, at your dinner table. And once you see these patterns, you cannot unsee them. Once this lens is placed over your eyes, the world will look different, sharper, clearer, and yes, colder. But clarity, even when it chills you, is always better than the warm fog of self-deception. Let us begin. Quote number 1. And this is the one that will crack the foundation of everything you think you know about loyalty. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Read that again. Not quickly. Slowly. Let every word land like a stone dropped into still water. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This is not just a statement about deception. This is a blueprint for understanding every single relationship you have ever had. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that no one wants to sit with. You do not know your friends. You know their performance. You know the version of themselves they have chosen to present to you. You know their curated personality, the one that was shaped and polished and rehearsed long before you ever entered the room. Think about it. How many people in your life have you actually seen in crisis? Not the small, manageable kind, the real kind. The kind where the mask slips, where the composure cracks, where the pressure becomes so intense that the true architecture of their character is exposed. Because it is in those moments, and only in those moments, that you discover who someone really is. Everything else is theater, and you have been sitting in the audience, clapping. You call someone your best friend because you have shared laughs, because you have spent time together, because they know your favorite restaurant and your relationship history. But none of that is loyalty. None of that is depth. That is proximity. That is repetition. That is habit, wearing the costume of connection. Machiavelli understood this because he lived in a world where the wrong alliance could cost you your life. Not your comfort, your life. In the courts of Renaissance Italy, a smile could be a weapon, a handshake could be a contract, and a friend could be the very person who opened the gate for your enemies. And while your stakes may not be that extreme, the mechanics are identical. The person who knows your vulnerabilities is the person most equipped to exploit them. Not because they necessarily will, but because they can. And Machiavelli's genius was in recognizing that the capacity for betrayal matters just as much as the act itself. So what does this mean for you practically? It means you stop evaluating people based on how they make you feel in comfortable moments. Anyone can be charming at dinner. Anyone can be supportive when the stakes are low. The test of a true ally is not how they behave when everything is fine. It is how they behave when everything falls apart. When your success threatens their ego. When your growth exposes their stagnation. When your light begins to cast a shadow over their carefully constructed self-image. That is where the mask drops. That is where the truth lives. And most people never look there because it is terrifying. It is terrifying to consider that the person you confide in might be quietly relieved by your failures. It is terrifying to consider that the person who always offers to help might be doing so to maintain a position of power over you. It is terrifying to consider that some of your friendships exist not because of mutual respect, but because of mutual convenience. But Machiavelli was not interested in comfort. He was interested in survival. And survival begins with seeing clearly. So here is your first task. Not an exercise, a reckoning. Think of the 5 people closest to you. Now ask yourself, have I ever seen them under real pressure? Have I ever witnessed what happens when their mask is not convenient anymore? Have I ever tested the foundation? Or have I simply assumed it was solid because it looked solid? Appearances are the most expensive currency in social life. People invest enormous energy in looking trustworthy, looking loyal, looking generous. But investment in appearance is not investment in substance. And the person who confuses the two will always be the last to know when the ground beneath them is hollow. This is not cynicism. This is architecture. You are not tearing down your friendships. You are inspecting the foundation before you build another floor. Now here is where this gets deeper. Because Machiavelli's quote does not only apply to the people around you, it applies to you. How much of what you present to others is actually who you are? How much of your friendliness is strategy? How much of your warmth is genuine, and how much is social currency designed to keep you safe, liked, and included? This is the part that stings, and it should. Because the moment you recognize that you too wear a mask, you lose the right to be surprised when others do the same. The game is universal. Everyone is playing it. The difference is, most people play it unconsciously, driven by instinct and insecurity. The person who plays it consciously, who chooses which mask to wear and when to remove it, that is the person Machiavelli would have called wise. Wisdom is not about being honest all the time. It is about being strategic about your honesty. It is about knowing when vulnerability is a bridge and when it is an open gate. It is about understanding that in every human interaction there is a surface layer and a structural layer, and the person who only reads the surface is always at the mercy of the person who designed it. Your friendships are no exception. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is the alarm system of growth. It is the signal that something in your current worldview is being challenged, and challenge is not destruction. It is renovation. You are not losing your friendships. You are gaining the ability to see them clearly. Let me give you a scenario. You have achieved something. A promotion, a breakthrough, a moment of recognition that elevates you above where you were. You share this news with your inner circle. Watch their faces. Not the first reaction, the second one. The first reaction is rehearsed. Everyone knows how to smile on command. Everyone knows how to say the right words. But the second reaction, the one that flickers across their eyes half a second later, the one they think you did not catch, that is the truth. Some will lean in. Their energy will rise with yours. They will ask questions, real questions, the kind that come from genuine curiosity and shared excitement. These are the ones Machiavelli would have kept close. These are the rare few whose sense of self is not threatened by your ascent because their identity is not built on comparison. But others will pull back, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Their smile will stay, but their eyes will dim. Their congratulations will come with a qualifier, a small joke, a redirect, a reminder of their own achievements. They will find a way to make your moment about them, or they will diminish it so skillfully that you will not realize what happened until hours later, when you are alone, wondering why your triumph feels smaller than it should. That is the architecture of envy disguised as friendship, and it is everywhere. Machiavelli did not invent this observation. He simply refused to look away from it. He stared at the ugliness of human nature with the precision of a surgeon and the detachment of a philosopher. And his writings, 500 years later, remain the sharpest mirror you will ever hold up to your social life. So the question is not whether the people around you are performing. They are. We all are. The question is whether their performance serves your growth or merely their own comfort. And only the person who has the courage to ask that question will ever find the answer. Now let this settle for a moment, because what comes next builds on this foundation. If quote number 1 cracked the surface, quote number 2 will dig into the fault lines of something even more sacred. The idea that loyalty is unconditional, that once someone proves themselves a friend, they remain one forever. Machiavelli had something devastating to say about that, and it changes everything. But before we get there, understand this. The discomfort you feel right now is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that something is waking up. There is a part of your mind that has always suspected what I am describing. A part of you that noticed the inconsistencies, the subtle shifts in energy, the moments where a friend's support felt performative rather than genuine. You noticed. You always noticed. But you lacked the framework to articulate it, the vocabulary to name it, the permission to act on it. Consider this your permission. The world teaches you that trusting people is virtuous, that seeing the best in others is noble, that giving people the benefit of the doubt is a sign of strength. And in some cases, that is true, but in many more cases, it is a trap, because the world also profits from your naivety. The person who trusts blindly is the easiest to control. The person who gives without discernment is the easiest to drain. The person who equates kindness with compliance is the person who will always end up carrying more than their share. Machiavelli saw this pattern not in individuals, but in systems, in governments, in alliances, in the machinery of power. And his conclusion was not that you should trust no one, it was that you should trust wisely. That trust should be earned in increments, tested under pressure, and revoked without guilt when the evidence demands it. That last part is the hardest, revoking trust. Because we have been conditioned to see the withdrawal of trust as a personal failure, as a sign that we were wrong about someone, that our judgment was flawed. But the opposite is true. Revoking trust when it is no longer warranted is the highest expression of self-respect. It is a declaration that your peace, your energy, and your trajectory matter more than the comfort of a relationship that has expired. And relationships do expire. Not all of them, but more than you think. People change, circumstances shift. The person who was your rock at 22 may be your anchor at 30. Not because they became a bad person, but because growth is not symmetrical. People evolve at different speeds, in different directions, and the friendship that once felt like a perfect alignment can slowly, imperceptibly, become a misalignment that drains you in ways you cannot immediately name. You feel it as fatigue, as a reluctance to answer their call, as a vague sense of dread before meeting up, as a pattern of cancelling plans and feeling relief instead of guilt. These are not random emotions. These are data points. Your subconscious is processing information your conscious mind refuses to accept. That this person is no longer serving your growth, and you are no longer serving theirs. Machiavelli would call this strategic awareness. The modern world calls it cold. But coldness and clarity are not the same thing. Ice and glass look similar from a distance, but one preserves and the other reveals. And what you need right now is not warmth. It is vision. Think of the friendships you are maintaining out of obligation, out of history, out of the fear that cutting someone loose makes you a bad person. Now ask yourself, who is that loyalty actually serving? Is it serving them? Or is it serving your own need to be seen as loyal, as dependable, as good? Because here is the brutal truth. Sometimes, holding on to a friendship that has expired is not an act of love. It is an act of ego. It is the refusal to admit that something you invested in did not yield the return you expected. And rather than accept the loss and redirect your energy, you double down. You keep showing up. You keep giving. You keep pretending. And all the while, the opportunity cost of that dead friendship is measured in the living ones you do not have the bandwidth to build. Machiavelli was ruthless about allocation, not of armies, of attention. He understood that every ounce of energy you spend on the wrong alliance is an ounce you cannot spend on the right one. And in the economy of human connection, attention is the only currency that truly matters. So as we move forward, carry this with you. Seeing your friendships clearly is not a betrayal of those friendships. It is a betrayal of your own weakness. It is the moment you stop being a passive participant in your social life and become the architect of it. And architects do not build on cracked foundations. There is a reason you clicked on this video. There is a reason these words are not bouncing off you but sinking in. Something in your life has already whispered what I am saying out loud. A friendship that felt off. A moment of betrayal you rationalized. A pattern you have been trying to ignore because confronting it would mean confronting the uncomfortable truth that you have been complicit in your own deception. You let them in. You gave them access. You handed over the keys to your emotional architecture because the world told you that is what friendship means. Openness, vulnerability, surrender. But Machiavelli understood that openness without discernment is not bravery. It is recklessness. And the reckless are always the first casualties in the game of human connection. This is not about becoming cold. This is about becoming precise. There is warmth in precision. The warmth of knowing that every person in your circle has earned their place. That every bond you maintain is built on substance rather than sentiment. That the walls of your fortress are guarded not by suspicion, but by standards. Standards. That is the word the world does not want you to use when it comes to friendships. You are allowed to have standards for your career, for your health, for your romantic relationships. But the moment you apply standards to your friendships, you are called calculating, selfish, paranoid, and that is exactly how the game is designed to work. The moment you raise your standards, the people who cannot meet them will try to make you feel guilty for having them. They will call your clarity cold. They will call your boundaries walls. They will weaponize the language of vulnerability to keep you accessible because your accessibility is their advantage. Machiavelli saw through this game 500 years ago. And now, so do you. If you have felt the weight of what I have described, if something inside you has shifted, even slightly, then you are ready for what comes next. Because the second quote from Machiavelli does not just challenge your understanding of loyalty, it dismantles it entirely. Stay with me. Here it is, the second quote. And if the first one cracked the surface, this one reaches into the marrow. Machiavelli wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." Sit with that. Most people read this and think it is about dishonesty, about breaking promises, about justifying betrayal. But that is the shallow reading, the reading of someone who has never been betrayed by a person they loved, the reading of someone who has never watched a promise dissolve in real time, slowly, silently, like salt in water, still technically there, but no longer solid, no longer something you can hold. What Machiavelli is telling you is far more dangerous and far more liberating. He is telling you that people do not break promises because they are evil. They break promises because circumstances change, because the person who made the promise is no longer the person standing in front of you, because the version of them that swore loyalty to you existed in a different context, under different pressures, with different ambitions. And that version is gone. This is the part about friendship that nobody prepares you for. The expiration. Not every friendship ends with a fight. Not every betrayal comes with a dramatic confrontation. Some friendships simply rot from the inside, quietly, gradually, like a house that looks perfect from the street, but whose walls are eaten through by something invisible. And by the time you notice, the structure is already compromised. You have experienced this. You know the feeling. The friend who used to call you every week and now takes days to reply. The friend who used to celebrate your wins and now responds with a flat, distracted acknowledgement. The friend who used to confide in you about everything and now shares nothing, offering only the surface, the performance, the socially acceptable version of connection. They did not betray you in the traditional sense. They simply outgrew the promise. Or you outgrew them. And neither party has the courage to name it, because naming it would mean admitting that something sacred has become ordinary. That something you both invested in has lost its value. And nobody wants to be the one who says it first. So instead, you both pretend. You maintain the ritual, the birthday texts, the occasional dinner, the social media interactions that create the illusion of closeness without any of the substance. And year after year, this dead friendship occupies space in your life, emotional space, mental space, energetic space that could be used for something alive. Machiavelli would call this a misallocation of resources. And he would be right. Here is what the world does not teach you. Loyalty is not a permanent state. It is a dynamic, living thing that must be fed, tested, and renegotiated. The person who was loyal to you 5 years ago is not automatically loyal to you today. Loyalty is not a contract signed once and honored forever. It is a daily choice. And the moment someone stops choosing you, not dramatically, not obviously, but in the quiet, invisible ways that matter most, the promise is already broken. And the worst part? They may not even realize it themselves, because most people do not betray their friends consciously. They do it through neglect, through prioritization, through the slow, unconscious reordering of their life, where you gradually slip from essential to optional, from optional to forgotten. This is not cruelty. This is gravity. This is the natural pull of human self-interest, the force that Machiavelli identified as the single most reliable predictor of human behavior. People will do what serves them, not always maliciously, not always deliberately, but consistently, predictably, inevitably. And the person who builds their emotional security on the assumption that this force does not apply to their friendships is the person who will be devastated when it does. So what do you do with this knowledge? You stop treating promises as permanent. You start treating them as present tense. You stop asking, did they promise to be loyal? And start asking, are they being loyal right now, today, this week, in this season of my life? Because a promise that existed in the past is historical data. It tells you who someone was. It tells you nothing about who they are. And the person who confuses history with the present is always vulnerable to the gap between the two. This is not about holding people to impossible standards. It is about releasing yourself from the prison of expired expectations. It is about giving yourself permission to evaluate your friendships based on current evidence, not past sentiments. It is about understanding that when someone's behavior changes, it is not your job to explain it away, to make excuses, to fill the gap they left with your own rationalizations. It is your job to notice, to adjust, to protect your energy as fiercely as you protect your time. Machiavelli did not mourn broken alliances. He studied them. He extracted the lesson, reallocated his resources, and moved forward. Not with bitterness, with clarity. And that is the invitation being extended to you right now. Not to become heartless, but to become honest. Not to abandon people, but to stop abandoning yourself for the sake of people who are no longer truly present. Every friendship in your life exists on a spectrum. At one end is active investment. The friend who shows up, who challenges you, who tells you the truth even when it hurts, who celebrates your growth without comparison. At the other end is passive decay. The friend who lingers out of habit, who takes without reciprocating, who exists in your life not because of what they add, but because of what it would cost to remove them. Most people are afraid of that cost, afraid of the empty space, afraid of the silence that comes when you stop filling your life with noise disguised as connection. But Machiavelli knew something about empty space that most people never learn. It is not a void. It is an opening. Every person you release who is no longer aligned with your growth creates space for someone who is. Every dead friendship you stop sustaining frees energy for a living one. Every expired promise you stop honoring liberates you to invest in promises that are still alive. This is the paradox of strategic solitude. You do not lose by letting go. You lose by holding on to what is already gone. Carry this forward. Now. The third quote. And this one cuts in a direction you might not expect. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." At first glance, this sounds like a commentary on manipulation, on the art of deception. And it is, partially. But the deeper reading, the one that applies directly to your friendships, is not about the deceiver. It is about the deceived. It is about you. Because here is the uncomfortable question Machiavelli is really asking: why do you allow it? Not why do people lie to you? That answer is obvious, because it serves them. The real question, the one that burns, is why you accept it. Why you see the signs and ignore them. Why you feel the inconsistency and rationalize it. Why you watch the pattern unfold time after time and still choose to believe the narrative instead of the evidence. And the answer, if you are brave enough to face it, is this: Because the lie is more comfortable than the truth. The lie says your friend truly cares about you. The truth says they care about what you provide: validation, entertainment, a sense of superiority, emotional labor, an audience. The lie says they would sacrifice for you. The truth says they would sacrifice for you only if the cost was low enough to be invisible. The lie says this friendship is mutual. The truth says you have been giving at a ratio that would bankrupt any business. And the only reason you have not noticed is because the currency of friendship is emotional, and emotional debts are the easiest to deny. You have been deceived, not by master manipulators, not by sociopaths in disguise, but by ordinary people doing ordinary things, prioritizing their own comfort, managing their own image, protecting their own ego. And the deception worked because you wanted it to, because believing the lie required less courage than confronting the truth. Machiavelli's genius was not in teaching people how to deceive. It was in showing them how to stop being deceived. And the first step is always the same. Stop wanting the lie more than you want the truth. Think about the friendships in your life that feel uneven. The ones where you are always the first to reach out. The ones where you are always the one adjusting, accommodating, compromising. The ones where your needs consistently take second place to theirs. Not because of some explicit agreement, but because an implicit dynamic has been established. One where your role is to give, and their role is to receive. You accepted this role, not because you are weak, but because you were taught that good friends sacrifice, that selflessness is noble, that putting others first is a virtue, and in many contexts, it is. But when the sacrifice is asymmetrical, when you are consistently depleted and they are consistently replenished, that is not friendship. That is consumption. And the consumed never recognize it because the consumption feels like connection. Every time you give, you feel needed. Every time you sacrifice, you feel important. Every time you absorb their problems, you feel purposeful. But this is not purpose. It is dependency. You have become addicted to the feeling of being indispensable, and they have become addicted to your supply. Machiavelli would not call this friendship. He would call this an economy, an invisible marketplace where emotional labor is exchanged for the illusion of closeness. And in every economy, someone is always getting the better deal. The question is it you? If you have to think about it, it is not. Here is the shift. The person who stops allowing themselves to be deceived does not become suspicious of everyone. They become attentive. They start watching behavior instead of listening to words. They start measuring investment instead of counting gestures. They start asking, what is this friendship costing me? With the same seriousness they would ask, what is this investment returning? Not because friendship should be transactional, but because pretending it has no cost is the most expensive lie you will ever believe. Let me paint this more vividly for you. Imagine you run a kingdom. You have limited resources: gold, soldiers, time, land. Every alliance you form costs something. Every treaty you sign binds you to obligations. Now imagine you discovered that 3 of your 5 most important alliances were providing nothing in return. Their soldiers never arrive when you call. Their gold never flows in your direction. Their loyalty exists only in the language of their letters, never in the reality of their actions. Would you maintain those alliances? Would you continue sending your resources to kingdoms that gave nothing back? Or would you do what any wise ruler would? Redirect those resources to the alliances that actually defended your borders? The answer is obvious when we frame it in terms of kingdoms. But when we frame it in terms of friendships, suddenly everyone gets emotional. Suddenly it is cruel to measure. Suddenly it is cold to calculate. Suddenly, you are the villain for noticing that you have been funding a friendship that has been bankrupt for years. This is the double standard Machiavelli refused to accept. He understood that the principles governing kingdoms and the principles governing personal relationships are the same. Because kingdoms are made of people, and people, whether they sit on thrones or on the other side of your dinner table, operate by the same fundamental rules: self-interest, self-preservation, self-advancement. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but always, always reliably. The person who understands this does not become hateful. They become liberated. They stop being surprised by human behavior and start being prepared for it. They stop asking, "How could they do this to me?" and start asking, "What did I fail to see?" Because the first question is the cry of the naive. The second is the inquiry of the wise. And the friends who are truly worth keeping? They will not be threatened by this clarity. They will welcome it. Because the person who genuinely cares about you does not need you to be blind. They need you to be strong. They need you to be the kind of person who demands quality, who refuses mediocrity, who holds the standard high, not to exclude them, but to honor them. To say, in effect, "You have earned your place in my life, and I do not grant that lightly." That is respect. That is Machiavellian friendship at its finest. Not a cold calculation, but a warm precision. The understanding that the highest form of loyalty is not blind devotion. It is discerning commitment. The choice to stand beside someone not because you have to, not because you always have, but because the evidence of their character, updated and current, warrants it. This is the filter Machiavelli used for every alliance he ever formed, and it is the filter you must now apply to every friendship you maintain. Not out of paranoia, out of self-respect. By now, something inside you has begun to shift. You can feel it. The lens is adjusting. The old patterns are becoming visible. The friendships you thought were solid are revealing their cracks, and the friendships you overlooked are beginning to show their strength. This is the process. This is the work. And it is uncomfortable precisely because it is real. But we are not done, not even close. Because the next two quotes go deeper still. If the first two expose the mechanics of deception and the illusion of permanence, the next ones will hand you the tools to rebuild. Not with naivety, not with cynicism, but with the cold, steady precision of someone who has learned to see the world as it is, not as they wish it were. You have already taken the hardest step. You looked. You allowed yourself to see the patterns, the imbalances, the performances you once mistook for authenticity. That took courage, and courage, in Machiavelli's world, was not the absence of fear. It was the willingness to act despite it. The comfortable thing would be to stop here. To close this video and return to the familiar warmth of your current friendships, pretending you did not hear what you just heard. That is what most people will do. They will absorb these ideas intellectually and then discard them emotionally because applying them would require change. And change is the one thing the human mind resists most ferociously. But you are not most people. If you were, you would not still be here. The fact that you have stayed, that you have absorbed every word, that you have felt the discomfort and leaned into it rather than away, that tells me something about you. That tells me you are ready. Not for comfort, for clarity. And clarity, once gained, cannot be ungained. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unknow what you now know. The architecture of your friendships has been illuminated, and you are standing in the blueprint, seeing the load-bearing walls and the decorative facades for what they truly are. The question now is not whether you will act on this knowledge, it is when. And the answer, if you are honest with yourself, is now. Not tomorrow. Not when the moment feels right. Now. Because every day you spend maintaining a friendship that does not serve your growth is a day stolen from the life you are capable of building. Machiavelli understood urgency. He understood that the window of opportunity for strategic action is always smaller than it appears, that the person who waits for the perfect moment will wait forever because perfection is the enemy of progress and comfort is the enemy of transformation. Consider what happens when you delay. When you see a friendship decaying and choose to wait, what happens is not preservation, it is erosion. Every week you spend pouring energy into a connection that does not return it. You are teaching yourself that your energy does not matter. You are training your subconscious to accept imbalance as normal. You are building a pattern of tolerance that will follow you into every future relationship, romantic, professional, familial. This is why Machiavelli insisted on decisive action, not cruelty, not abruptness, decisiveness. The ability to look at a situation clearly, assess it honestly, and act accordingly, without guilt, without second-guessing, without the paralyzing need to be liked by everyone at the expense of being respected by yourself. The person who masters this skill does not lose friends. They curate alliances. They build a circle not by accident, but by design. Every person in their orbit is there for a reason, contributing something real. Wisdom, challenge, honesty, support that extends beyond words into action. And the result is not loneliness. It is the rarest, most valuable thing in human connection. A circle you can actually trust. Not because you tested them with tricks, not because you interrogated their motives, but because you paid attention. Because you watched their behavior over time, in good seasons and bad, in moments of your triumph and moments of your failure. And what you saw, consistently and reliably, was alignment. Real alignment. The kind that does not waver when the winds change. That is what Machiavelli was really searching for in all his writings about alliance and power. Not the absence of trust, but the presence of earned trust. Not cynicism, but the refusal to confuse hope with evidence. So stay with me, because what comes next is not just insight, it is instruction. The next two quotes will not only change how you see your friendships, they will change how you conduct them, how you enter a room, how you offer trust, how you withdraw it, how you hold space for the people who matter, and how you release the ones who do not. This is where philosophy becomes practice. This is where Machiavelli stops being a historical figure and becomes your personal strategist. Are you ready? Then let us continue. We have arrived at the turning point, the place where knowledge becomes a weapon. Not the kind of weapon that destroys, the kind that defends, the kind that carves through the noise of your social life and reveals the signal. Because understanding Machiavelli intellectually is one thing, living by his principles is another, and it is in the living that transformation happens. Quote number 4. And this one is specifically about how power moves through friendships. Machiavelli wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." Now, before you flinch at the word deception, understand what Machiavelli actually meant. He was not encouraging lying. He was describing the mechanics of influence. He was pointing to a truth that governs every social interaction you have ever had. Direct confrontation is almost always the worst strategy, and the person who masters indirect influence will always outmaneuver the person who relies on brute honesty. Let me translate this into the world of friendship. You have a friend who consistently disrespects your boundaries. Maybe they share your personal information with others. Maybe they make jokes at your expense in front of people. Maybe they always push past your limits because they have learned that your limits are suggestions, not walls. The common reaction, the reaction most people default to, is direct confrontation. You sit them down. You tell them how you feel. You explain your boundaries. You ask them to change. And what happens? They apologize. They promise to do better. And then, within weeks, the behavior returns. Not because they are incapable of change, but because direct confrontation rarely changes behavior. It only changes the surface. It forces the other person to adjust their performance without altering the underlying dynamic. They learn to be more discreet, not more respectful. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. He knew that the most effective way to change someone's behavior was not to demand it, but to engineer the conditions where they choose it themselves. Not through manipulation in the dark sense, but through strategic repositioning. Through the subtle art of adjusting your own behavior in ways that naturally shift the dynamic. Here is how this works, practically. Instead of confronting the friend who disrespects your boundaries, you withdraw. Not dramatically, not with an announcement or an ultimatum. You simply become less available. You reduce access, you stop initiating contact and wait. You respond a little later. You share a little less. You attend fewer of their gatherings and more of your own. What happens next is predictable and powerful. In the absence of your usual accessibility, they are forced to confront the gap. They feel your absence not as an attack, but as a natural consequence. And in that space, one of two things happens. Either they recognize the imbalance and adjust, reaching out more, respecting your boundaries because they now understand the cost of not doing it, or they do nothing, revealing that your presence in their life was never valuable enough to fight for. Either way, you win. Either the friendship improves, or you gain the clarity to release it. This is what Machiavelli meant by winning through deception, though a better word would be strategy. You do not announce your move. You do not explain your reasoning. You simply act and let the consequences speak for themselves. Because the most powerful communication in any friendship is not what you say. It is what you do. Words are the currency of the weak. Behavior is the currency of the powerful. Let me give you another scenario. You are in a group setting. A friend makes a comment that diminishes you, not overtly, not in a way that would justify a confrontation, but subtly. A backhanded compliment. A joke that carries a blade beneath the laughter. You feel it. Everyone in the room may or may not feel it, but you know. The common response is to react, to defend yourself, to match their energy or challenge them directly. But this is the reactive path, and the reactive path always gives the other person power because it shows them they reached you. It shows the room that you can be destabilized. And in the invisible chess game of social dynamics, showing destabilization is the same as showing weakness. The Machiavellian response? Silence. A look. A pause, so deliberate, so controlled, that it fills the room with more weight than any words could. You hold their gaze for 1 second longer than comfortable. You do not smile. You do not frown. You simply register, with your eyes, that you heard them, that you understood the blade beneath the joke, and that you chose not to draw yours. Not because you cannot, but because you do not need to. This is the art of the non-response, and it is devastating, because in that silence the other person is left with nowhere to go. They made their move and received nothing in return. No laughter, no defense, no escalation. Just presence. Just the unshakable calm of someone who is not playing the same game. And everyone in the room felt it. They may not articulate it. They may not even consciously process it, but on a primal level, they registered the shift in gravity. They sensed that you operate on a different frequency, that you are not someone to test lightly. This is power. Not the loud, aggressive kind that announces itself, the quiet, magnetic kind that pulls the room toward it without saying a word. Practice this. The next time someone tests your composure with a subtle jab, do not react. Breathe. Hold. Let the silence land. And then, if you choose to respond at all, do so on your own terms, in your own time, with words so measured they feel carved from stone. You do not defend your position. You embody it. Here is another scenario that you will recognize. You are going through something difficult. A loss, a setback, a moment of vulnerability. You reach out to a friend, and their response is technically correct. They say the right words. They offer sympathy, but you feel nothing from it. No warmth, no weight. just the hollow echo of someone going through the motions. This is perhaps the cruelest form of friendship failure, the person who is physically present but emotionally absent. The person who shows up to the scene of your pain with a script instead of a heart. And you know the difference. Your body knows the difference. There is a warmth that comes from genuine care that cannot be faked, no matter how perfect the words. And there is a coldness that comes from obligation that cannot be hidden, no matter how many times they say they are there for you. The Machiavellian response to this is not confrontation. It is information gathering. You note it. You store it. You add it to the file of evidence you are building about who this person really is underneath their title. And the next time they need something from you, you respond with the same calibrated warmth they gave you. Enough to fulfill the social contract, but not enough to drain your reserves for someone who has shown you their ceiling. This is not revenge. This is equilibrium. This is the natural correction that occurs when you stop giving more than you receive and start matching the energy that is offered to you. It is one of the most powerful shifts you can make in any friendship. The shift from unconditional giver to strategic investor. Let me give you one more scenario, because this one is critical. The friend who only appears during your low moments. There is a certain type of person who is conspicuously absent during your triumphs, but magically present during your failures. They never celebrate your wins, but they always show up for your losses. They offer comfort, advice, support, but only when you are down. The moment you rise, they vanish. The moment you succeed, they grow distant. This is not coincidence. This is architecture. This person is not your ally. They are feeding on your vulnerability. Your low moments give them a sense of superiority, a position of power, a role they can play that makes them feel needed without requiring them to confront their own inadequacy. Your success threatens that dynamic. Your growth disrupts their comfort, so they withdraw when you are strong and return when you are weak. Machiavelli would have identified this person immediately, not as an enemy, as a parasite. A subtle, well-disguised parasite who wraps their dependency in the language of care. And the only response to a parasite is strategic distance. Not anger, not explanation, just the quiet, methodical reduction of access until they no longer have the proximity to feed. Now, here is another tactic that Machiavelli's fourth quote teaches us, and it applies to the most common trap in friendship. The trap of over-explaining. When a friendship is shifting, when you are pulling away, raising your standards, or re-evaluating your circle, the instinct is to explain, to justify, to sit the other person down and detail every reason for the change. This feels honest. This feels mature. This feels like the right thing to do. It is not. Over-explaining is not generosity. It is vulnerability disguised as courtesy. When you explain your reasons for withdrawing from someone, you are handing them a map of your inner world. You are showing them exactly where your boundaries are, which means you are also showing them exactly how to circumvent those boundaries in the future. You are arming them with the very information they need to adjust their performance without changing their character. The strategic move is to act without narrating, to shift without announcing, to evolve without publishing a press release about your evolution. Because the person who watches you change without understanding why will either rise to meet you or reveal themselves by remaining where they are. And both outcomes serve you. Silence is not passive. Silence is the ultimate active choice. It is the decision to let your actions be your autobiography and to stop wasting your breath on people who will read the words but miss the meaning. Quote number 5. The final one. And this is the one that ties everything together. Machiavelli wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles." This is the quote that separates the pretenders from the powerful. Because here is the truth about friendship that almost no one talks about. The title of friend means nothing if the person holding it does not honor it through action. How many people in your life carry the title of friend without earning it daily? How many people sit in the inner circle of your life simply because they have been there for a long time? How many people are granted your trust, your energy, your attention, your vulnerability, not because of what they do now, but because of what they did once? Time is not a qualification. History is not a credential. The fact that someone has been in your life for 10 years does not mean they deserve to be in your life for the 11th. The title of friend is not a lifetime appointment. It is a daily election. And the person who fails to campaign, who fails to show up, who fails to invest, who fails to honor the weight of what that title represents, should not be surprised when the position is revoked. This is the hardest truth in this entire video, because we are taught that long friendships are inherently valuable, that the people who have known you the longest know you the best, that shared history is the same as shared destiny. It is not. Shared history is data, nothing more. It tells you where you have been together. It tells you nothing about where you are going. And the person who navigates their future by constantly looking in the rearview mirror will always crash into what is right in front of them. Machiavelli observed this in every court he ever served. The advisors who had been with a prince the longest were often the most dangerous. Not because they were disloyal, but because they were complacent. They had stopped earning their position. They had stopped proving their value. They had settled into the comfort of their title and forgotten that titles, without the behavior to back them up, are just words. Your friends are no different. The friend who was your rock during a difficult time 10 years ago may be your biggest drain today. Not because they changed, but because you changed. Your needs evolved. Your standards rose. Your capacity for depth expanded. And the friendship that once met you where you were can no longer reach where you are going. This does not make them a bad person. It makes them an expired ally, and the distinction matters enormously. Because the moment you confuse the two, the moment you label someone as bad instead of recognizing them as misaligned, you introduce guilt into a process that should be governed by clarity. There is no guilt in outgrowing a friendship. There is only guilt in pretending you have not. So, here is the practical application of Machiavelli's fifth quote. Look at the people in your life who carry the title of friend and ask one question. Are they honoring it? Not with words, not with gestures, not with the rituals of friendship, the birthday messages, the social media comments, the surface-level check-ins, but with substance, with presence, with the willingness to invest in the friendship at a level that matches the access they have been granted. Because access is everything. The people closest to you have access to your fears, your insecurities, your dreams, your vulnerabilities. They have the blueprint of your emotional architecture. And if they are not actively protecting that blueprint, if they are not treating that access with the reverence it deserves, then the title they carry is not a badge of honor. It is a liability. Here are the mistakes most people make and the corrections Machiavelli's thinking demands. Mistake number 1, equating frequency with depth. Just because you see someone often does not mean the friendship is deep. The coworker you eat lunch with every day may know less about you than the friend you speak to once a month. Frequency is logistics. Depth is investment. And the person who confuses the two will always surround themselves with bodies instead of allies. Mistake number 2, rewarding words over actions. Pay attention to what people do, not what they say. The friend who constantly tells you how much they care but never shows up when it matters is not a friend. They are a narrator. They are writing the story of your friendship without ever appearing in the chapters. Judge by behavior, always by behavior. Words are free. Actions cost something. And the only currency that matters in friendship is the one that has a price. Mistake number 3, avoiding confrontation at the cost of your standards. Some people are so afraid of conflict that they will tolerate anything: disrespect, neglect, betrayal, rather than risk the discomfort of a difficult conversation. But avoidance is not peace. It is surrender. And the person who surrenders their standards to avoid confrontation has already lost the only battle that matters, the one with themselves. Mistake number 4. Ignoring patterns because of exceptions. Someone hurts you. You confront it, or you don't. Either way, they do something kind soon after. And you latch onto that kindness like a lifeline, using it to justify the pattern of harm that preceded it. This is the trap of exception-based thinking. One good deed does not erase 10 acts of neglect. One kind word does not neutralize 100 subtle jabs. The pattern is the truth. The exception is the performance. And the person who cannot distinguish between the two is the person who will always find reasons to stay in friendships that are slowly consuming them. Mistake number 5. Believing that loyalty requires suffering. This is perhaps the most destructive belief of all. The idea that if a friendship is painful, it is because you are being tested. That enduring mistreatment is proof of your loyalty. That the best friends are the ones who make you bleed and keep coming back. No. Loyalty does not require suffering. It requires alignment. It requires reciprocity. It requires the mutual recognition that both parties are investing at a level that justifies the depth of the connection. And the moment that reciprocity collapses, the moment one person is carrying the weight while the other coasts, that is not a test of loyalty. That is a failure of respect. Machiavelli would never advise you to suffer for an alliance that does not serve you. He would advise you to study the imbalance, extract the lesson, and redirect your resources with precision and without apology. That is what power looks like in the context of friendship, not dominance, not control, but the quiet, unshakable refusal to accept less than you deserve. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, if some people in your current circle would feel threatened by these words, then that discomfort is not your problem to manage. It is their reflection to sit with. You are not responsible for how people react to your standards. You are only responsible for maintaining them. And the person who lowers their standards to preserve a friendship that does not honor them has made a trade that Machiavelli would have considered the greatest strategic failure of all, sacrificing your sovereignty for the illusion of companionship. Let me ask you something direct. How many of the people you call friends would still be in your life if you stopped initiating? If you stopped reaching out first? If you stopped planning the gatherings, sending the messages, making the effort? How many of them would notice your absence within a week, within a month, within a season? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, it should, because it reveals the true architecture of your social life. It shows you who is investing and who is merely attending. It shows you who is building the bridge and who is merely walking across it when it is convenient. The Machiavellian test of friendship is not a grand gesture. It is the absence of one. It is the removal of your effort and the observation of what fills the void. Because what fills the void, silence or initiative, indifference or concern, tells you everything you need to know. This is the transformation that has been unfolding inside you since this video began. Not a change of personality, a change of perception, a recalibration of the lens through which you view every relationship in your life. And with that new lens comes a new standard, a standard that honors the title of friend by demanding that those who hold it earn it, not once, not in the past, but now, continuously, demonstrably, without exception. Are you ready to see what this new version of you looks like? Then continue with me, because the final act of this journey is the most powerful of all. Something has changed. You feel it, even if you cannot name it yet. There is a weight in your chest that was not there an hour ago. Not the weight of sadness, the weight of truth, the kind that settles into your bones when something you have known your entire life finally gets articulated. When the vague unease you carried through 1,000 social interactions is suddenly given a name, a shape, a structure. You are not the same person who started this video. That version of you, the one who smiled at every face in the room, who trusted based on history instead of evidence, who gave access to people who had long stopped earning it. That version is dissolving. Not dying. Dissolving. Because what replaces it is not colder, it is clearer. And clarity, despite what the world tells you, is the highest form of compassion. Compassion for yourself. Compassion for the life you are capable of building. Compassion for the future relationships that will be built on granite instead of sand. Machiavelli was not a man without feeling. That is the great misunderstanding. The portrait of him as cold, calculating, heartless, that is the caricature painted by people who could not handle the mirror he held up. In truth, Machiavelli was one of the most passionate observers of human nature who ever lived. He did not detach from humanity. He studied it with such intensity that his conclusions felt ruthless. But ruthlessness and precision are not the same thing. A surgeon cutting to save is not cruel. A surgeon cutting blindly is. And what Machiavelli taught, what you are now carrying, is the ability to cut with purpose. Let me describe the person you are becoming. You walk into a room and you see it differently now. The dynamics, the hierarchies, the invisible alliances and unspoken tensions. You notice who gravitates toward whom. You notice who speaks with authority and who speaks for attention. You notice who listens with their entire body and who listens with half an ear while waiting for their turn. These details were always there. You simply lacked the framework to organize them. Now you have it. And with that framework comes something else. Sovereignty. Not the arrogant kind that pushes people away. The quiet kind that draws the right people in. The kind that says, without saying anything, that you are a person who operates by standards, who values substance over spectacle, who will give you everything if you earn it, and nothing if you do not. That energy, that aura of discernment, is the most attractive force in any social environment. Because in a world of performers, the person who is genuine becomes magnetic. But here is the paradox. And this is the final revelation, the one that ties every quote, every insight, every uncomfortable truth from this video into a single, devastating conclusion. The paradox is this: the more selective you become, the deeper your friendships will be. The more people you release, the more space you create for the ones who matter. The more boundaries you build, the more trust you will inspire. Because true friendship, the kind that Machiavelli would have valued, the kind that survives pressure, betrayal, time, and change, does not flourish in the absence of standards. It flourishes because of them. Think about it. The friend who knows that your trust must be earned will treat it with reverence. The friend who knows that your time is limited will honor every moment of it. The friend who knows that your circle is small and curated will feel the weight of being included. And that weight, that gravity, is what transforms ordinary connection into something extraordinary. This is the secret that the world's most powerful people have always understood. Their inner circles are small, not because they are antisocial, not because they are paranoid, but because they know that the quality of your alliances determines the quality of your life. And quality, by definition, is the enemy of quantity. Machiavelli's 5 quotes were never just about friendships. They were about the architecture of your entire existence. They were about how you allocate the most precious resources you have: your energy, your trust, your time, your vulnerability. And whether you allocate them with the precision of a strategist or the recklessness of someone who has never been burned, you have been burned. You know it. I know it. The scars are there, hidden beneath the smiles and the social pleasantries, buried under years of rationalizing behavior you should have rejected long ago. But those scars are not weaknesses. They are data. They are the tuition you paid at the University of Human Nature. And the only question that matters now is whether you will use that education or let it go to waste. Let me consolidate what you have learned. Quote 1. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This means you stop evaluating people by their presentation and start evaluating them by their pressure test. The mask is always on. Your job is to find the moments where it slips. Quote 2. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. This means you stop holding people to expired commitments and start measuring loyalty in real time. Who someone was is history. Who someone is, right now, today, in this season, is the only data that matters. Quote 3. One who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. This means you take radical responsibility for your own clarity. If you are being drained, exploited, or diminished in a friendship, the question is not why they are doing it. The question is why you are allowing it. And the answer, always, is that you wanted the comfort of the lie more than you wanted the liberation of the truth. Quote 4. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by strategy. This means you stop confronting and start repositioning. You do not announce your moves. You do not explain your evolution. You act. You shift. You let the silence do the work that words never could. And in that silence, the truth about every friendship in your life will reveal itself. Quote 5. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. This means you stop granting the title of friend based on history and start granting it based on current investment. The longest friendship is not automatically the deepest. The deepest friendship is the one where both parties, continuously and demonstrably, honor the weight of the word. 5 quotes, 5 principles, 5 keys to a social life built on granite instead of glass. But knowledge without action is entertainment. And you did not come here to be entertained. You came here to be transformed. So let me give you the final instruction. Starting today, not tomorrow, not next week, today, you are going to conduct an audit. Not a dramatic one. Not one that involves confrontations or announcements. A silent one. An internal one. You are going to look at every person in your inner circle and ask 3 questions. First, when was the last time this person invested in our friendship without being prompted? Not responded to your effort, initiated their own. Not reciprocated your energy, generated their own. If you cannot remember, that is your answer. Second, when was the last time this person celebrated my success without making it about themselves? Not their performance of celebration, their genuine, unqualified joy at your ascent. If you cannot remember, that is your answer. Third, when was the last time this person told me a truth I did not want to hear? Not a criticism, not a judgment, a truth. Something uncomfortable, delivered with care, that showed they valued my growth more than my comfort. If you cannot remember, that is your answer. These 3 questions will illuminate your circle with brutal precision. Some friendships will pass all 3. Protect those with your life. They are rare. They are invaluable. They are the alliances Machiavelli would have killed to have. Others will fail 1 or 2. These are the friendships worth having a conversation about. Not a confrontation, but a recalibration. A subtle shift in investment that signals, without words, that the current dynamic is no longer acceptable. And some, perhaps more than you expected, will fail all 3. These are the friendships you release. Not with anger, not with resentment, with gratitude for what they were and clarity about what they no longer are. This is the metamorphosis. This is the moment where you step out of the old architecture and into the new one, where you stop being the person who collects friends and become the person who curates allies, where you stop measuring your social life by how many people you know and start measuring it by how deeply you are known. Because here is the final truth, the one Machiavelli never wrote, but lived every day of his life. The most powerful person in any room is not the one with the most allies. It is the one who knows, with absolute certainty, that every ally they have is real. That certainty is not given. It is earned. Through vigilance, through discernment, through the willingness to look at uncomfortable truths and act on them rather than hide from them. It is earned through the very process you have been going through for the last hour. The questioning, the re-evaluating, the shedding of illusions. There is something else Machiavelli understood about alliances that most people overlook entirely, the concept of strategic generosity. Because everything I have said might tempt you to withdraw from everyone, to build walls so high that nothing gets through. But that is not power. That is fear wearing the costume of strategy. And Machiavelli would have seen through it in an instant. The truly powerful person does not withhold from everyone. They invest heavily, but selectively. They pour their loyalty, their energy, their time into a few people with such intensity that those bonds become unbreakable. Not through obligation, through abundance. When you have 5 friends instead of 50, you can give each of them 20 times the attention. You can show up for them in ways that would be impossible if your energy were scattered across a dozen shallow connections. This is the beauty of the Machiavellian circle. It is small, but it is deep. It is selective, but it is fierce. The people inside it are not kept at a distance. They are held close, held tight, held with the full force of your commitment. Because you know, without doubt, that they have earned it. And they know, without doubt, that you will defend them with everything you have. This is the friendship that Machiavelli actually valued, not the absence of trust, the concentration of it, not the elimination of vulnerability, the strategic placement of it. You do not open yourself to the world. You open yourself to the few who have proven, through action, through consistency, through the crucible of time and pressure, that they are worthy of what you are offering. And those few, those rare, tested, proven allies, they will change your life in ways the 50 never could. Because depth creates intimacy. Intimacy creates understanding. Understanding creates loyalty. And loyalty, real loyalty, the kind that survives storms, is the most valuable asset you will ever possess. So do not mistake this video for a call to isolation. It is a call to precision, to the understanding that your social energy is finite, and the way you distribute it will determine the quality of your entire existence. Give it wisely. Give it deliberately. Give it to the people who would give theirs back to you without hesitation, without calculation, without condition. That is the final lesson. That is the core of everything Machiavelli tried to teach. Not that people cannot be trusted. But that trust is the most expensive thing you own, and only a fool spends it carelessly. And now that the illusions are gone, what remains? You. Not the version of you that needed approval. Not the version that confused proximity with intimacy. Not the version that tolerated disrespect because confrontation was scarier than suffering. That version has served its purpose. It kept you alive. It kept you connected. It kept you from the terror of standing alone. But you do not need it anymore. Because standing alone, truly, deliberately, strategically alone, is not a sentence. It is a stance. It is the posture of someone who has decided that the quality of their inner world matters more than the size of their outer circle. And from that stance, from that position of sovereign clarity, the right people will find you. Not because you chased them, not because you performed for them, but because strength recognizes strength. Precision recognizes precision. Depth recognizes depth. And you will know them when they arrive. Not because they announce themselves, not because they perform for you, but because you will feel the weight of their presence in a way you never could before. Because now you know what real feels like. Now you have a standard, Now you have a filter so precise that nothing fake can survive passing through it. The friendships that await you on the other side of this transformation are not the friendships you are used to. They will be quieter, fewer words, more weight, less performance, more truth. They will be built on the understanding that neither party owes the other anything except honesty, and that honesty, even when it cuts, is the only foundation strong enough to hold the weight of real connection. This is the world Machiavelli envisioned. Not a world without trust. A world where trust is earned, tested, and maintained with the same rigor we apply to every other investment in our lives. A world where friendship is not a default setting, but a deliberate choice. A world where the people in your life are not there by accident, but by design. You are now the architect of that world. And being the architect means accepting a responsibility that most people will never take on, the responsibility of design. You are no longer at the mercy of whoever happens to walk into your life. You are no longer collecting connections by default, hoping that quantity will eventually produce quality. You are building with intention. Every person you allow into your circle from this moment forward is a choice. A deliberate, informed, strategic choice based on evidence, not emotion. Based on patterns, not promises. Based on who they are, not who you wish they were. This is not easy. In fact, it is the hardest social discipline there is, because it requires you to say no to people who feel good but do not do good. To release connections that are comfortable but not catalytic. To sit in the temporary emptiness of a curated life and trust that the emptiness is not a void. It is a foundation. A cleared site where something meaningful can finally be built. And it will be built. It is being built right now, in the silence between these words, in the shift that has been occurring inside you since the first sentence of this video. You are not the same. And the people around you will feel it. Some will lean closer. Others will step back. And in both movements, you will find your answer. So, if this message resonated with something deep inside you, if these 5 quotes have cracked open a truth you have been carrying in silence, then I ask you to do one thing. Comment below the phrase, "I choose my circle with the precision of a blade." This is not a comment. It is a declaration. It is a silent pact between you and the version of yourself that emerged during this hour. A version that no longer settles. A version that no longer confuses comfort with connection. A version that looks at every relationship through the lens of a strategist and the heart of a sovereign. And if you choose to subscribe to this channel, understand this. You are not merely clicking a button. You are joining a fortress, a place where we do not seek the warmth of approval from strangers. We seek the cold, unbreakable certainty that comes from knowing who we are and refusing to dilute it for anyone. A place where we carry the weight of our own aura and find strength in the gravity of our own presence, rather than borrowing light from those who would dim us the moment we shine too bright. This is not entertainment. This is architecture. Every video on this channel is a brick in the fortress you are building around your mind, your energy, and your standards. And the people who build alongside you, the ones who understand these words not as theory, but as lived truth, those are the allies worth having. Go now, and carry what you have learned not as a burden, but as a blade. Let your silence be your response to those who do not deserve your words. Let your standards be your shield against those who confuse access with entitlement. Let your solitude be your sanctuary, not your prison. And let every friendship you maintain from this moment forward be built on the only foundation that has ever mattered. The unshakable, unapologetic, Machiavellian truth that you deserve nothing less than what you give. The hour you spent here was not passive. It was not entertainment. It was surgery. You allowed these words to cut away the illusions you were clinging to, the comfortable lies, the expired loyalties, the performances you mistook for presence. And what remains beneath all of that is something cleaner, sharper, more honest than anything you have ever carried into a room. You will be tested. Not immediately. The universe does not work on your schedule. But soon, a friend will disappoint you. A circle will shift. A loyalty you assumed was permanent will reveal itself as conditional. And in that moment, you will have a choice. The old choice, to rationalize, to forgive without evidence, to absorb the blow and pretend it did not land. Or the new choice, the Machiavellian choice, to see clearly, to act decisively, and to protect your energy with the same ferocity with which a sovereign protects their throne. You know which choice you will make. You already made it. Machiavelli saw the world for what it was, and now so do you. Until the next time we meet within these walls, be precise, be sovereign, be untouchable, not because the world cannot reach you, but because you have finally decided what is worthy of getting close.